Well, if you were here last week, you survived two-dimensional Brad, so that's good. Somebody told me in the lobby today that they liked me on video more than in person, so I'm not sure what to make of that, but that's fine. It's good to be back this week in the flesh. I had a couple weeks off, which is good. You know how you get sick of hearing me on a Sunday? Imagine me. I get sick of me too, and so it's good for me to rest a little bit every once in a while. But I'm glad to be back today, and we're going to continue in our series in the 10 commandments. And I want to start with a disclaimer, okay? Because we are, if you're keeping score at home, we're up to the 7th commandment now, and this commandment is about sex. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But I want to tell you right up front, okay, totally PG, okay? Like, it's gonna all be like good, above board. Like, please, you guys know me. I'm not trying to shock anybody. I'm not trying to say anything crazy. But we do talk about real stuff around here, and we follow the Bible, we follow the text where it leads us. And so today we are going to talk about God's design for sex, as well as we're gonna talk about sexual sin. But I promise you, nothing crass, nothing edgy. Like, I'm not trying to get something clipped and put on the internet, okay? Like, I don't want any part of that. We are just gonna go, what does the Bible say about this? Now, I know for a lot of us, this is uncomfortable, and we're like, hey, I'm not sure we should be talking about this in church. And by the way, if you think it's awkward for you, imagine being me, right? Because my mom watches these messages, so this is weird. But one of the reasons that we're really awkward about this in church and uncomfortable with it is because historically, the church has done a bad job talking about sex. If you grew up in church, you probably heard some of the same stuff I did as a kid, as a student. It was like, hey, sex is bad, it's gross, it's yucky, stay as far away from it as you can. And then supposedly on the day you get married, you're supposed to just flip this switch and now everything's perfect and it's the greatest thing ever. And you're like, I don't know how to make sense of what you're telling me. And so it's hard to understand. I hope we can do a little bit better than that today. And just look at God's design, because if God designed something, then it's good. And I think his design is worth fighting for. And so that's what we're gonna look at. And I hope that maybe in this conversation around sexual sin, that maybe some of us might experience some freedom today as well. So, you ready? Are you excited? Is it weird? It's weird, it's okay. Exodus chapter 20, if you got a Bible with you, get it out. Let's go to Exodus chapter 20. And the primary reason this topic makes us uncomfortable is actually, though, because of sin. See, God isn't uncomfortable with this topic. God has no problem with what we're doing right now. It doesn't bother him. He's not squirming, but you are, right? Because it's uncomfortable. Why? Because we are all, at some level, we are all impacted by sexual sin. It has distorted us. When I say sexual sin, what do I mean? Here's what the Bible, we'll flesh this out a little bit today, but here's what the Bible teaches, is that sexual sin is any sexual pleasure or satisfaction outside of the context of marriage, which is between one man and one woman. This is what the Bible teaches. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it, whatever the Bible says. Any pleasure or satisfaction outside of the construct of marriage is sexual sin. Now, before you hide under your chair and feeling like shame or whatever about this, listen to me. All of us, every single one of us is impacted by sexual sin. Certainly our own. But also, we are all born into a world that's already carrying the baggage of sexual sin. We were born to parents who are impacted by sexual sin, and they had parents who were impacted by sexual sin, and they had parents, and it's passed down over generation and generation and generation, so that all of us, every single one of us, is impacted by this kind of sin. That's why we get so uncomfortable, because we look into God's perfect word and we know we can't live up to this standard. But here's what I hope you would hear today, is grace, is that whatever your past, whatever you come to this conversation with, is that you're not alone. You're not, and there's no shame. We don't do shame here. God doesn't do shame. You're not alone in this. There is no shame. All of us is impacted by this topic. By the way, do you realize that Jesus was impacted greatly by sexual sin? Not his own, right? He who died a sinner's death knew not sin. He's perfect. But have you ever looked at, in the beginning of the Jesus stories, what we call the Gospels, specifically Matthew and Luke, have you noticed there are these family trees, right? Kind of these boring genealogies, these list of names, right? Have you ever looked at some of the names in Jesus' background, in his family tree? Let me tell you a few. Abraham. What did Abraham do? Abraham cheated on his wife with her maid. He then also sold his wife for some livestock, but that's a different story for a different day. He's a great guy. Judah slept with his daughter-in-law. Rahab, prostitute. King David had an affair, impregnated the woman, and then killed her husband in hopes that no one would find out about it. His son, Solomon, 700 wives, 300 sex slaves. I mean, this is the family tree of Jesus. Oh, and by the way, his own mother. You think when that unwed pregnant girl came into town that there weren't rumors? That there wasn't shame and gossip surrounding her? This is the world Jesus came into, and the family that he came into, greatly impacted by sexual sin. And yet Jesus doesn't run from it. Who does he hang out with? He hangs out with, the Bible says, with sinners and prostitutes, people who are greatly affected by sexual sin, and he brings about grace in their lives. And so I want to say all that preemptive to this conversation of sexual sin and of God's design for sex, that there's so much grace here that you don't have to bury your head. You don't have to feel any shame today. Regardless of your past, regardless of whatever, you don't have to feel shame to this topic. Let's just look at what is God's design. And I hope you maybe will experience some grace today. So here we go, Exodus 20, verse 14. We're in the 10 Commandments, right, that God gives to Israel, these guardrails that they're going to live by. This is his law. This is God speaking, and he gives the 7th commandment in verse 14. And he says, pretty straightforward, he says, you shall not commit adultery. He says to the Israelites, you shall not commit adultery. Now, before we get into what this means, let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the world. What are things like? Because context is everything. So what is happening in the lives? What are the lives of the Israelite people like when God speaks these words? So here's something that we know from this text. We know that this commandment in particular, primarily, we know this based on the language, primarily God is speaking in this moment to married people, okay? So we're going to talk about singleness here in a little while, but right now in this moment, he's specifically addressing married people. It doesn't mean that it doesn't apply more broadly, but he's talking to married people, right? Okay, so what were marriages like at this time in history? Right, 3,500 years ago, what is marriage like? Marriage is a little bit different then than we would probably start to understand it today. Like we would talk about marriage and we would say maybe it's this relationship that is founded in love and two people fell in love with each other and then they sort of bonded themselves to each other for the rest of life. Marriage was a little bit different in the ancient world. Marriage was probably less about love and more about survival and legacy. Right? So for women, it was about survival because a husband meant someone to provide for them, to feed them, to shelter them, to protect them. And for men, marriage was about legacy because a woman meant babies. And there's no greater, more important thing for a man in the ancient world than legacy, that his name and lineage lives on beyond his generation. So I'm not saying that marriages didn't have love involved, absolutely, but they probably were founded more in their construct on this contractual, sort of pragmatic kind of way of thinking. So there's something really interesting in the way God gives this commandment. Understanding marriage at the time, there's something interesting in the way he says. So he says, do not commit adultery, right? So adultery meaning, literally, it means don't have a sexual relationship with someone you're not married to, okay? That's what it means. But more broadly, we're talking about sexual sin. Do not commit adultery. But interesting, this word that is used here, the word commit. So think about commitment. When you commit to something, you attach yourself to it. Right? Like it's more than, committing is more than just something you do. You give yourself to it. You attach yourself to it. If I borrow money from you and I commit to pay it back, I'm putting my name, my reputation, my resources on the line, right? If you are a committed follower of some favorite sports team, you've put your energy, your effort, probably even some resources into following that sports team. Commitment, that word commitment involves some investment of self, which is super interesting because the world would have you believe that this sex thing is just something you do. That it's just a physical thing. It's just an act. Hey, listen, if everybody consents and nobody gets pregnant, no harm, no foul, right? Like it's just a thing that you do. But then God uses this word commit. And commit means to more than something that you just do, but something you give yourself to. I think what God is trying to show us here is that there's something unique about this commandment, and there's something unique in particular about sexual sin, that it's more than just something you do. He will not go on to say in later commandments, he will not go on to say, you shall not commit lying, or you shall not commit coveting. He just says, don't lie. So why doesn't he say, and we could come up with a word for don't adulter, right? We could come up with a word, but he uses the word commit. I think God is telling us there's something different about sexual sin. There's something that we ourselves are attached to it in some way. And the Bible actually goes on to talk about this and really confirm this. 1 Corinthians 6 talks about that every other sin is just really something that you do, but that specifically sexual sin involves the fullness of who you are, that you are committing yourself to something, to an act and to someone that is beyond just physical. Again, that's why we squirm at this topic. That's why this topic of sin is probably the greatest producer of shame in our lives, because the fullness of ourselves is bared out in this topic. It's not just something that we did, but it's something we put ourselves into. We brought ourselves into. The whole self sort of comes to bear. And so God, I think, is saying that, yes, this topic of sex, it is physical, yes, but it transcends into emotional and a spiritual sort of thing. And that's why he uses the word, I think he used the word on purpose, commit. You shall not commit adultery. That word is so interesting, especially in light of what we talked about with marriages at the time. Because if they were really more contractual, almost business-like, these sort of calculated types of relationship, then why use such a personal word? If it was just this party is here to provide legacy and this party is here to provide survival, then why use a strongly personal word like commit? I think God knows something, and he's trying to teach the Israelites something in this moment, that sex changes a relationship, that it creates a bond, that it creates a commitment that is beyond the physical, that crosses into the realm of emotional and spiritual and all kinds of other things that are the fullness of who we are. In fact, if you've been to a wedding recently, it's wedding season, right? Summer always is. If you've been to a wedding, you've probably heard this verse. There's a verse very early on in the Bible. Go back to the Garden of Eden. And God is talking to Adam and Eve, and he's actually teaching them about marriage and about sex. And he says, this famous verse in Exodus 2, verse 24, he says, therefore, he's talking about marriage, he says, therefore, a man will leave his father and his mother and will be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. So this design, this construct of marriage and with it, sex, the design of this is that there is a bond where two become one. This is both a physical analogy and a spiritual analogy, that two become one. And what God is saying in this commandment, and why he's talking about do not commit adultery, is he's saying that this bond cannot be cleanly broken. If two have become one, if sex creates a oneness, then what sexual sin does is it tries to pull apart the oneness and go back to two separate entities. And God is like, he's saying in this commandment, he's like, you can't do that, at least not in a way that doesn't cause all kinds of pain. That's what, and I'm not going to chase this far, but like that's what divorce does, right? If you're the product of divorced parents, or you yourself have gone through divorce, why is there so much pain? And like, hang on, like, no shame, right? Like what's done is done. We can't unscramble the eggs. Okay, it's cool. But even if you talk to people I talk to a lot of people who are divorced and remarried and so happily remarried, and that's awesome. But even they would say, this isn't how it's supposed to be. Something broke along the way, right? Meaning there was a bunch of pain that I had to experience, and that's what God knows. That you can't take, if two become one, you can't take now what is one and pull it back to two. That's the seventh commandment. It is literally like ripping limbs from a body to undo this. It cannot be done without pain. And God, he's like, I don't want that for my kids. He's such a good and gracious father. And he knows the height and the bond of intimacy. But he also knows the pain. And so he says, listen, sex is more than a physical act. It's a commitment of self. And so he goes, I've built this thing and I've given it to you, but it belongs in one context. It belongs in the context of marriage between one man and one woman, designed for lifelong union. And he's saying, like, don't go outside of that. If you go outside of that, it's going to cause you all kinds of pain. And like, again, just like all of these commandments that we're going through, it is not God going, hey, here's the rules, here's the religion, here's the law, you have to follow it. It's this good dad who's like, hey, I'm going to put guardrails up. Because left to your own devices, you're going to put this thing in the ditch. And so I'm going to put guardrails along the highway to protect you. So I think that's what he's doing here in this commandment. Now, I think it raises a whole bunch of questions about how we actually take this sort of teaching and bring it to life. It just, a bunch of stuff surfaces in my head. Like, okay, all right, you should not commit adultery. Okay, so what if we've broken this commandment? What if you've caused that kind of pain, or you've been the recipient of that kind of pain? Where do we go from here? Right? So that question sort of surfaces for me. Another question that surfaces for me is like, okay, this is from antiquity. Like, this is 3,500 years ago, right? The world is different. Like, we've evolved. Women don't need men to survive in the same way, like, clearly that they did then. Like, so you look at it and you go, I don't know. Even some of the ideas of the ancient world of monogamy, and we're just looking at a culture, right? Like, just look at it, like monogamy and waiting till you're married to have sex. Like, I don't know. There's a way culture would hear that and go, okay, old man, like that's sort of prudish. Like, I don't know. So the question is, like, does this still apply? Does God's construct of all of this and the guardrails that he's given us still apply? I think that's sort of worth asking. And then the third one that comes up for me is, okay, the command talks about literal adultery. Right? And so I think what we often do is go, we love the letter of the law, and so we take it and go, okay, cool. Literal adultery. As long as we don't commit that, are we good? And so there's a sense of like, can we walk up to the line? Can I go sort of this far, but I'm good? Is it okay if I kind of push the bounds as long as I don't cross that line? I think all these sort of questions surface. So I want to go a little bit deeper into this commandment. So let's go over to the New Testament. Go to Matthew chapter 5 with me, if you would, where Jesus is going to talk about this very commandment. And like he did last week, when he was about murder, he sort of brings out the heart of what was intended. He's going to do the same thing here in Matthew chapter 5, talking about this commandment. And I think it helps us step out of religion, out of rule, into what does this play into in our lives. So let me go there. Matthew chapter 5, and let's look at verse 27. Jesus is speaking. Listen to what he says, verse 27. Jesus says, you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. There's our seventh commandment, right? He goes, you've heard this before, right? It's from Exodus. You've heard it. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So you've heard that it was said, you know the commandment. He says, but here's what I'm going to tell you. Anyone who looks at a person lustfully has already committed adultery with that person in their heart. So Jesus is doing Jesus things, right? Where he goes, okay, I know you've heard it. Let's go. He just has this way of going, tell me what's going on in your heart. Right? He sort of dismisses the rules and the religion. He peels back the layers of our heart. And he goes, okay, let's talk about what's in here. Because I know what you're doing. You're like, I've not crossed that line. But he's like, I can see your heart. I know there's some stuff in there. And I know you're trying to live by the letter of the law and call that good. But I see what's going on in your heart. He's like, is your heart full of lust and of sexual sin? Jesus knows us so well. He knows us so well. He knows that we're going to go, okay, I hear the law, so here's what you're telling me, God. This is what we're going to do. Here's what you're telling me, God. I can look as long as I don't touch, right? That's the rule you're trying to tell me, right, God? And Jesus is like, what is happening in your heart? And he uses the same language, right? Where he says, even if you lust, you have committed adultery. He picks up on the same language. That even when you look at a person and you say, that would satisfy me. I want that. That would make me happy. That's what I'm looking for. That's better than what I have right now. Jesus is like, you've already crossed the line. Because in your heart, that God has not laid out rules and religion and just check these boxes, but like in your heart, you've already tried to give part of your heart to that person that you're lusting after. And by the way, you already have this oneness. Again, he's talking to married people too. You already have this oneness. So to try and give something to that person, you'd have to pull apart this, and it's going to be destruction. And Jesus says, all of us, he knows he's got us. All of us have lusted in our heart. And he's like, I got you. I got your heart. You want to play religion with me? I got you. I know what's going on in there. And he says that is going to tear at the oneness that God has designed us for. This is the problem. I'm not going to spend much time on this. This is a sermon for another day. This is the problem with pornography, or one of the problems with pornography, is that you're looking at someone, or you're looking at someone, and you think it's just this physical thing, but you are expecting that person to complete a oneness in you that your soul desires, to bring intimacy to you. And it doesn't. It can't. That kind of intimacy that you seek can only happen in the confines, the context of marriage. And so pornography, like, you're wrestling outside of God's design. You're over the guardrails, and you can't figure out why it doesn't fully satisfy. It's because it wasn't made to. It's because it can't. It's impossible. The commitment that two people isn't possible in the case of pornography. So keep going. Jesus keeps going, right? He says, you've heard it said you should not commit adultery. Anyone who looks lustfully at a woman has already committed adultery in his heart. You can flip that around, man, woman, man. Verse 29. He says, so, if your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off, throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. Is Jesus really telling people to mutilate their bodies? No, I don't think so, but he's trying to show how serious sin is, in particular, how serious sexual sin is. It's specific to specific to pornography. I'm going to say men. I know the statistics say men and women, but I'm going to talk to men for a minute. Men, if pornography is part of your story, like, if that's part of your journey, and you think that that's going to bring, like, it needs to stop, like, today. And I'm the grace guy. I'm all about grace. Jesus was all about grace. I always want to be about grace. I'm not playing around on this one, though. Like, you need to knock it off. If this is part of your story, man, you need to go home today. This is what needs to happen. You need to go home, you need to have some lunch, you need to sit down with your wife, and you need to say, and I don't want you masking it in this language of, oh, I'm really struggling. You need to be man enough and humble enough to admit, I have a problem. I have sinned against you, and I need help. And you know what, honey? Your reaction probably to that isn't going to be very good, but I love you too much, and I love Jesus too much to keep doing what I'm doing. And, like, you have to make that decision today. Like, I'm not doing this anymore because I'm cheating on my wife. Like, don't hide behind pornography, fellas. You're cheating on your wife if you're looking at pornography. Not my word. You don't have to take it up with me. That's what Jesus just said. I'm not talking about shame. We're not doing shame here. But I am talking about purity. I am talking about what is right in the eyes of the Lord and wanting to please him. The Apostle Paul says this in 1 Corinthians 6. He says, flee sexual immorality. The word for flee, it like implies to literally get up and run away. See, you got to get this, because we try and reverse this. You got to get this. You can't manage your sexual sin. You can't manage sexual temptation. Your only choice is to run from it. You can't manage it. You think you can, but you can't. Oh, I can have that conversation, but it won't cross into inappropriate. Oh, I can do this, but it won't cross the line. Oh, I can look at that, but it won't. It'll be okay. No. Like, you can't manage it. You think you can, but Jesus goes at the heart, and he's like, you can't. This is the heart of the commandment. It's about adultery, literal adultery, yes, but it's also about sexual sin. It's like, you can't manage it. You got to run from it like your life depends on it, because according to what Jesus just says, it does. Your very soul. You could be so in love with sin, it could cost you your soul. And so he's like, run from it. Okay, so what do we do with this? That feels like a lot of don'ts. Don't. Okay, what's the what do we do with this? Two things I want to talk about, and then we'll be done with this awkward conversation. One is, I want to get, okay, what's the right view of sex? If we go, here's what, like, okay, what's the right view? What's God's design? And then two, I want to talk about grace. So the right view, sort of a right view. I think God's design of sex is something like this. In my family, we tend to end up gathering around our fireplace. We just always have. When we lived in Pennsylvania, that meant trudging out through the snow and collecting firewood and bringing it in. Here in our house, I just push a button on a remote. It's fantastic. And we have a fire in our house. It's awesome. We love to gather around the fire. Maybe in the fall, we have a fire pit or whatever when it's cooler. And just, right, fires are awesome. It's warm. It's family. We roast marshmallows. It's great. We love to be around that. So imagine if I said, hey, I love fires. And so right here on a Sunday morning during the middle of a message, I'm going to have a fire right here on stage. I brought some firewood. I'm going to build it up. I brought some lighter fluid. We got to really get it going, right? Like you'd be like, this guy's an idiot. If I was just like, hey, while I'm preaching, we're going to have a fire. That wouldn't work, right? Why? Because it's not the right place. It's not the right setting, right? We said fires are awesome. Fire can be great. Fire cooks our food. Fire warms our houses. It's awesome. Fire has, again, around our fireplace has a feeling that we love as a family. But it has a proper place. If we just lit a fire in here, imagine the chaos, the destruction that it would cause. Tons, right? People get hurt. Stuff would get destroyed. It's not the fire that's the problem. It's the setting. It's the context and it being in its proper place. See, sex is a gift from God. But when it's not contained, when it's not in the proper setting, it will destroy everything around it. It will burn down everything. That's why God gives this commandment. It's because he's a good dad who wants to protect his kids. It's not because he's like, hey, let's take away all their fun. Let's ruin their lives and make them feel a bunch of shame. He goes, no, here's these guardrails to protect us because he wants good things for us. So, what is the proper setting for the fire? Great, Proverbs 5, just listen. God says, drink water from your own cistern, running water from your own well. It's kind of poetic, but just go with me. Should your springs overflow in the streets, or your streams of water in the public squares? No, right? The implication, no. Let them be yours alone, never to be shared with strangers. May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth. Again, it's poetic. He's talking about marriage, and he's talking about sex. And you know what he says? This is what our good father, this is what dad says. He goes, kids, have fun. Light the fire. Listen, I know this is hard for some of us to believe, maybe because of our backgrounds or maybe things that have happened to us. God created sex, and sex is a good thing. But he gives this sandbox for us to play in called marriage. But when you go outside the walls of the sandbox, it's destruction. It's chaos. And I know we all think, well, it'll be okay, I'm fine. No, none of us can beat this. Like, you got to understand that. Men have been trying to beat the odds on this for millennia. No one has. You're not going to. When we go outside the walls of this sandbox that is marriage, it's destruction. We look over and we go, oh, the grass is greener. No, it's not. It's thorns and thistles. It looks good until you get out there. This is the design that God has. He goes, I made sex. It's a great thing. Here you go. But in the right setting. And the right setting is marriage. One man, one woman, intended to be a lifelong union. Let me talk to you if you're single for a minute. Some choose to be single. Some wish they weren't single. Maybe for you, like being single right now is sad and lonely. Okay? Yep, definitely. It could be frustrating. It can also be an incredible gift. I know you go, that's easy for you to say. Those aren't my words. Those are God's words. That singleness can actually be an incredible gift. The Apostle Paul said that he actually loved being single because to have a wife and a family, to have kids would actually hinder the things that he believed God was calling him to do. They would almost get in the way of the things that God was asking him to do. And so if you're single right now, and maybe for some of you, you'll be single your whole life. Okay? Maybe for some of you, you won't. But is it possible to look at this season of life and go, man, God has me here for a reason? Maybe God has me here because there's some sort of flexibility about being single that allows me to serve him better or to serve people better. And to actually lean into this moment. You know, as a single person, you can have incredible relationships and friendships that you couldn't have if you were married. Because maybe they would be inappropriate, or maybe you wouldn't have the time for it, right? You could have incredible relationships, deep, meaningful, intimate sort of friendships. Are they going to involve sex? No. But we have to get past this. We have to understand that sex is a great thing. But it's not the greatest thing. And I think for young people, if you're of an age where you're not, marriage isn't a thing yet, okay, don't despise this season of life. Walk with Jesus. Learn about the type of person that you want to maybe someday have as a spouse. And lean into your own relationship with Jesus, because that will transform you and make you the type of spouse somebody would actually want to have. See, our culture has done this thing. Our culture has done this thing where simultaneously, culture has treated sex as if it's nothing. It's this throwaway thing. Just do it. It's your body. Who cares? Do whatever you want. While somehow simultaneously elevating it to the greatest thing ever. Everything is overly sexualized. It's all about sex. You have to have sex, right? Let me tell you something. Neither extreme is true. Sex is fine. It's a gift of God. It's not the greatest thing. Knowing and growing with Jesus is. And maybe for you hear that and you go, that's so cute and churchy and prudish. That's fine. It's true. Knowing and growing with Jesus is the greatest thing. If you're single, lean into your singleness. God has you in it for this season, for a reason. If you don't want to be single, talk to God about that. He knows, it's okay. But this is God's design, that sex would belong in the fireplace that is marriage. And when we step out of that, there's pain. Now, one more thing. Let's talk about grace. Because some of us come to this conversation, it's really hard because we have a past. We have a sexual history, and we look at this conversation and we are ashamed of things that we've done. Or we are embarrassed by things that have been done to us. I get that. I think this area of sin is different. I mean, I will talk to people, the way we carry the burden of our past, of our sin in this area is so different. I talk to people who are like, they're feeling shame of something that happened 30 and 40 and 50 years ago. And they've carried it their entire life. So if that's you, if you come to this place and then you're like, this is uncomfortable and whatever, let me just point you to Jesus for a minute. Let me point you to a couple of interactions that Jesus had. One was with a woman at a well in Samaria. He meets this woman who's been married 5 times. She's shacked up with some new dude now. And does he shame her? No, he actually defies all the religious rules of the day, and he invites her to worship. There's another story where he interacts with this woman who was caught in adultery. You know that story? She was literally caught in the act of adultery. They took her out of someone's home, naked, into the town square in front of the entire community, where they were ready to stone her. Did Jesus shame her? No. He offered her protection. He offered her grace. Man, he knows the shame that we feel, and yet he doesn't tear us down. He invites us to come to him for goodness and forgiveness and freedom, and he gives grace. And he, like in the case of the woman caught in adultery, he chases off the accusers. The accuser who says, you're disgusting because of what you've done. You are damaged because of what has been done to you. Jesus chases them away, and he replaces our shame with peace and with joy. Maybe you're struggling with right now with just the thought of just sin and shame. Man, the weight of brokenness is heavy. The weight of sin is heavy. But Jesus actually wants to take that weight off you. Jesus understands the weight and shame of sexual sin. He does. Again, not his own, but he gets us, right? Like, I figured this out when I learned that most scholars will say that when Jesus was hung on the cross and he was crucified, that he was crucified naked. Imagine being exposed while everyone is laughing at you, humiliating you, spitting on you. he knows that sense of pain and shame that we feel. And he meets us with grace. And so let me just say, whether you're single, dating, married, engaged, widowed, divorced, this is our hope. This grace of Jesus is our hope. Some would have you believe that the ultimate experience, the ultimate expression of humanity is sex. It's not. It's knowing and trusting Jesus. And so wherever you are in your journey, fight for God's design in your life. If you're in the midst of sexual temptation, run. Don't try and manage it. Run from it. Run and get help. Run towards Jesus. If you're thinking about stepping outside of your marriage, the grass is greener. Don't. It's not. If you're carrying the weight of sin and shame today, bring it to Jesus. And let him show up. Maybe it's years old shame that you're carrying. Today you could bring it to him and let him replace that shame with peace and joy and grace. Let me pray for us. Father, I thank you for your word. God, this is an awkward topic in some ways. But ironically, God, you know the story of each person here, and you're not uncomfortable at all. You know the fullness of our stories, and you don't run away. You don't snicker in the corner at us. You don't accuse us. You give us grace. So God, I pray today, Lord, I ask that you would heal some wounds in us that maybe have existed for years, or maybe not, maybe they're fresh. Because we've done some things that we wish we hadn't done. Would you remind us of the forgiveness through Jesus Christ that we have? And God, some of us are ashamed because of the awful things that have been done to us. Would you remind us today that is not who we are, those things that someone did horribly to us. God, would you today, if any of us, if we are living in sin in this area of our lives, would you convict us? Not shame us, God, you don't do that, but would you convict us of our sin? Would your Spirit cause us to step out and say, I don't want to keep doing this. I don't want to live like this anymore. I'm trying to, God, some of us are trying to live outside of your design and then ask for your blessing upon that, and it doesn't work that way. So God, would you change us so that we could live afresh and live anew for you? God, thank you for your son, Jesus. Thank you that so often we see him show up in these stories, meeting people who are just like us. And Jesus was full of truth and full of grace, and we need both. And so we thank you for him. We thank you for his life and that he gives us new life. We love you, God, and we pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.